Page 91, 38. Time, thou anticipatest my dread exploits. Ellipsis. The firstlings of my hand. Act 4, Scene 1, page 119. This is said by Macbeth when he comes to know from Lennon that Macduff has fled. This is said by Macbeth when he comes to know that Lennox that Macduff has gone to England. He has got warning from the witches against Macduff. When he met the witches in order to know, quote, by the worst means the worst, unquote, 3 apparitions appeared. An armed head warning him against Macduff, a bloody child exhorting him to be, quote, bloody, bold and resolute, unquote. With the witches gone, enter Lennox, who give him the news that Macduff has escaped to England. Macbeth regrets his delay in decision and execution. Now, between the thought and the action, he will allow no interval. Time prevents him from executing the fearful deeds that he contemplates. The inaudible and noiseless movement of time steals away ere we can overtake it. This is to say, the plan is never fulfilled unless carried out at once. Henceforth, what his heart first conceives, his hand shall execute. His plan will be converted into a deed as soon as it is formed. Quote, the first conception of the heart will be the first act of the hand, unquote. Macbeth has been lulled into a false sense of security by the predictions of the witches. He has become more desperate and more ruthless. He plans to carry out the murder of Macduff immediately. Since Macduff has escaped, he will feed his grudge by slaying his family. Word notes. Anticipatest, preventest, forestalls. Dread exploits. The fearful deeds that I contemplate. Flighty is fleeting. Quote, the inaudible and noiseless foot of time steals ere we can effect them, unquote. This is from All's Well That Ends Well, Act 5, Scene 3, lines 40. The flighty purpose, quote, the plan is never fulfilled unless carried out at once, unquote. Firstlings, first fruits, quote, what my heart first conceives, my hand shall first execute. This is from New Clarendon. 39. Macduff, this noble passion, ellipsis, truth and honor. This is from Act 4, Scene 3, page 133. This is said by Malcolm after he has been satisfied about the bona fides of Macduff. Malcolm, who fled from Scotland after his father's murder, grieves for Scotland. Yet he will not join Macduff to fight for her against Macbeth unless he is satisfied that Macduff is not the enemy's spy. Having tested him fairly, thoroughly, he comes to trust Macduff. Yet he chooses to subject him to a second test and gives a lurid picture as a sink of vices, as a worse villain than even Macbeth, and then calls upon Macduff to make his choice between him and the tyrant. Macduff is prepared to make large concessions to his alleged vices, but when told that Malcolm has not one redeeming virtue, quote, none of the king becoming graces, unquote, his hopes are finally frustrated. He reproaches Malcolm as the most dissolute of persons. Macduff's holy anger disarms Malcolm's suspicions. He says to Macduff that his holy wrath is the outcome of his honesty and integrity. This has removed from his mind all suspicions and misgivings about him. He is now reconciled to the truth and honor of Macduff's proposals. He now places himself unreservedly in Macduff's hands for his country's service. In the character of Malcolm, we notice modest wisdom and watchful distrust. These are in glaring contrast to rash generosity and blind trustfulness that characterized his father Duncan. Word notes: child of integrity, that is, outcome of honesty, which springs from your honesty. Page 92. Black scruples. These are doubts and suspicions of treachery. Reconciled, honor. Convinced me again that you are a sincere and upright man, and that your motives are honorable. 40. Be comforted, to core this deadly grief. Act 4, Scene 3, page 139. This is said by Malcolm to Macduff when the latter is overpowered by grief at the merciless slaughter of the whole of his family by the tyrant Macbeth. Macduff is a man of reserve and reticence. He does not speak out his sorrow-laden heart, but the few short words he utters express the depth of his grief. He pulls his hat on his brows and thus tries to restrain his tears and conceal his grief within. He asks questions about the murder of his wife, children, repeatedly. His mind goes about in a circle. He is dazed. The tremendous emotion of Macduff's repeated enquiry is one of the moving things in the play. Malcolm realizes the depth of his grief. He pats him on the hand and tries to console him. He says to Macduff that they will plan their revenge on Macbeth in such a way that when they have done it, they will have achieved a national triumph. In that triumph, Macduff will drown his grief, which, if allowed to run its course, would be disastrous. His grief is the deadly disease, and revenge is the appropriate medicine. 41. He has no children, at one fell swoop, ? This is from Act 3, Scene 1, page 139. The context is as explanation 40. Kenneth Moore, in the Arden edition, suggests that there are three explanations of this passage. 1. He refers to Malcolm, who, if he has children of his own, would not suggest revenge as a cure for grief. 2. He refers to Macbeth, on whom he cannot take an appropriate revenge. 3. He refers to Macbeth, who would never have slaughtered Macduff's children if he had any of his own. The second interpretation has no basis. Because Macbeth had children, his anxiety to get rid of Banquo and Fleance would have any sense only if he is supposed to have children alive. It is more likely than either that he refers to Malcolm. Malcolm asks him to be comforted. So the bereaved father says to himself that Malcolm, being childless, cannot understand the depths of his grief. If he had, he would not have tried to console him with such futile words. The expression of his grief in repeated questions shows the shock and bewilderment of the man. The reiteration of all, within quotes, only adds to the poignancy of sorrow. He describes Macbeth as a hell kite. He has swooped upon all his children and their mother and destroyed them at one ruthless stroke. Swoop, within quotes, suggests the continuation of comparison of Macbeth with hell kite. Dover Wilson suggests that there is also present the sense of losing all in a sweepstake. These lines give the striking instance of Shakespeare's power of compressed language. Every question he asks is charged with deepest feeling. The repeated questions show that he cannot trust his ears. Note the pathetic emphasis on, quote, all. These lines give the character of the man. Macduff is a man of strong family affections. He is not a heartless, affectionless political hero. It is a measure of his patriotism that this affectionate husband and father had abandoned his family in the interest of the country. Word notes. Chickens is children. Dam is mother. Quote, Pope, thinking apparently that the image was too homely for the occasion, transferred these words to the margin. Unquote. This is from Clark and Wright. Macbeth is a hell kite and Macduff's children are chickens. Page 93. The hell kite pounces on the chickens and their dame in a sudden attack of downward plunge. Macbeth is the terrible bird of prey, and Macduff's children and their mother are its helpless victims. The suggestion of dire cruelty on the part of Macbeth and of utter helplessness of his victims who are left alone by their protector, that is, father and husband, is beautifully conveyed in the lines. 42. Out, damned spot, ellipsis, so much blood in him. This is from Act 5, Scene 1, page 144. This is said by Lady Macbeth in her sleepwalking. Lady Macbeth enters with a taper in her hand. She has light by her continually. Darkness appalls her. Darkness which she invoked during the murder of Duncan is her terror now. She continually rubs her hand in order to wipe out the stain of blood. This has an ironical suggestion. Quote, a little water does not clean, unquote, her of the deed. She hears in her sleep the bell which is struck to inform her husband of the correct moment for the murder. Or she may be hearing the clock strike 2, after which she gives the signal. On the eve of the murder of Duncan, she was listening for the clock to strike with a nervous, high-strung intensity, and the memory comes back to her. She thinks of the darkness of the night of murder. As she recalls the darkness of the night of the crime, she thinks of the darkness of hell, thus showing, as Verity points out, quote, her fear of the after death, unquote. She rehearses over again her taunting of her husband, in brackets, compare, within quotes, art thou afeard, etc., unquote, in Act 1, Scene 7, brackets closed. She is again recalling her old words to her husband before the murder. Who dares receive it other? From Act 1, Scene 6, line 77. She remembers Duncan lying in a pool of blood. When she went to place the daggers by the side of the grooms, she saw Duncan smeared with blood. What she saw there came to be deeply, quote, seared into her brain, and the sear shows itself now, unquote. The sight of Duncan lying in a pool of blood has been a persistent memory with her, the horror of which she cannot overcome even in sleep. The stark terror of these lines has nothing to equal even in this play, which teems with terror. Lady Macbeth walks in sleep and mumbles incoherently the memories of the fatal night. The scene is an ironical commentary on her complacence immediately after the murder. The scene exposes with grim irony the hollowness of Lady Macbeth's belief that a little water clears us of this deed. There is no order in her thoughts. Old memories come pell-mell and jostle against one another. The failure of nature in Lady Macbeth is marked by her fear of darkness. These mumblings in sleep clearly show the tortures of conscience in Lady Macbeth. Quote, she too had murdered sleep, and now in sleep her nature gives way to cursed thoughts, dreadful memories that rise like drowned corpses to the surface of the troubled mind. Unquote, Grierson. 43. The Thane of Fife, ellipsis, with this starting. Act 5, Scene 1, page 145. The context is as explanation number 42. Lady Macbeth thinks of Lady Macduff. She is a woman feeling for the murdered woman. Lady Macbeth's tormented conscience takes upon itself a share of responsibility for all the crime of her husband, even those committed without her knowledge. She puts a question to her husband about the wife of Macduff. She had no part in the murder of Lady Macduff and her children, so the question is natural. Then again she thinks of the stain of blood on her hand, the damned spot. Then her mind goes back to the banquet scene. She asks her husband not to be frightened in that way. This has a reference to Macbeth's horror on seeing Banquo's ghost. The transition from one murder to another is natural. Compare, oh, these flaws and starts, etc. in the banquet scene. The lady has perfect control over herself when she is in her senses, but when her sense is shut, she gives way. Page 94. 44. Here's the smell of the blood, ellipsis, sweeten this little hand. Act 5, Scene 1, page 145. The context is as explanation number 42. Lady Macbeth cannot get rid of the smell of blood even in her sleep. The smell of blood offends her delicate sense. She would have it removed with perfumes, but she says that all the perfumes brought from Arabia, the traditional land of perfumes, will not be able to impart fragrance to her small feminine hands. The contrast is between, quote, all the perfumes of Arabia, unquote, and her, within quotes, little hand. Grierson notes, quote, Macbeth's imagination is visual, colon. It is the color of the blood that appalls him. Cross-refer, Act 2, Scene 2, line 62. It is an amazing Shakespearean touch that the sense impression which poisons Lady Macbeth's memory comes from smell, the smell of the blood which she handled, when she handled the daggers. Verplanck, Verplanck, comments, quote, the smell has never been successfully used as a means of impression the imagination with terror, pity, or any of the deeper emotions, except in this dreadful sleepwalking scene of the guilty queen. Unquote. Word notes. Arabia was the fabled home of perfumes. 45. Canst thou not minister, ellipsis, which weighs upon the heart? Act 5, Scene 3, page 153. This is said by Macbeth to the doctor when the latter gives him the report about the state of the queen's mind. Macbeth has grown desperate. He is sick of reports continually pouring in about his followers deserting him. Although he places implicit faith in the prophecy of the witches that none of woman born can touch him, He feels extremely uneasy. He is testy, moody, and melancholy. He is impatient and sick of heart. He is callous to doctor's report about the state of the Queen's mind. He cares only to know if the doctor can minister to a mind diseased and pluck from the memory a rooted sorrow, meaning obviously his own diseased mind and his rooted sorrow. He is thinking of himself. His own mind is diseased. A rooted sorrow is the curse of life. He wants to have it plucked out. But is the doctor capable of such a healing? Can the doctor blot out the deeply inscribed troubles of his brain? Can the doctor clear the overcharged heart of the heavy load of sorrow that presses his heart by giving him some sweet medicine capable of bringing happy forgetfulness of all that has happened? His desire for medicine shows the nature of his disease. It is an inexplicable memory of guilt which he longs to forget. In questioning the doctor, he thinks more of himself than of his wife. Macbeth suffers the terrible mental tortures because of his crime. This vouchsafes to us the picture of Macbeth suffering the torments of conscience. Word notes. Minister to is relieve. Rooted is firmly implanted. Raise, wipe off. Oblivious, causing forgetfulness. Stuffed, overcharged. Stuff, heavy load of sorrow. NB. Here, most commentators regard the text as corrupt, but the repetition in stuffed and stuff is deliberate. The ardent editor suggests stuffed, meaning covered with slough, or the dead part which separates from a sore, and he bases it on the ground that a verbal jingle is pointless here. But the weary, callous Macbeth would very naturally glide into this sort of jingle.